You already started saying it, Vinay. When the web came, we started thinking about all the possibilities, and a lot of thought went into now this opens up for new business models. You can move away from advertising on radio and TV to something else, something new, maybe something more democratic, something that makes more sense. But what we ended up with is identity by Facebook, funded by advertising. It's Google, funded by advertising. And it's the same revenue model, right, being used again. So going into the Web 3.0, if you like, using blockchain for web services, we see the same hype, and maybe this will open up new business models. Will it, or will it not?
Well, there's hope, because if you think of just the open financial or system and payment side of things, that capability has been missing from the web all along, and they had to create these alternative systems to capture value and sort of keep these sites running like Facebook, like Google. So now that with this technology, we have this built-in payment capability where now you can transfer value back and forth between users and applications. I think now we have a chance that these new models can emerge. So yeah, I'm hopeful.
Yeah, I would. I'm not coming from a point of actually knowing, because most of our investments are pretty much B2B SaaS business models, even though they're using blockchain technology. But I would say that from an investor perspective, that if we truly want to innovate, then we cannot base every investment decision on what has already been, right? So we have a tendency to go, right, is there something else similar to what they're doing already that's worked for us to be able to validate that that's going to work again? And if we truly want to fund new innovative ideas, maybe not huge amounts of money like we did see in the past, but some sort of funding, then we do need to think outside of the box. And I don't know the answer to that, if I'm being really honest with you. We're always looking for what's out there from a new business model perspective, because we haven't seen any real success yet. Bear in mind, I realise I'm going against what I've just said. But for us, it's trying to figure out what that looks like, and then trying to get some real traction in market with a new type of business model, because that's what we're struggling with, right? We don't have any examples to go on, and so people fear what they don't know. And investors are the worst, like you say.
I agree, but how are you on time, Katie?
Fine, I need to shoot. That was my last thing. I'm out.
No, with time with the plane. You're out.
Yeah, okay.
I
need to run now.
I think blockchain technology as infrastructure of trust might bring some real change in business models, simply, and especially like the collaborative way of operating. And because if we see today, we have a lot of these really expensive multi-sourcing models that cost a lot to keep up and running. And I think basically blockchain technology might be a driver, and it's going to make it simpler to innovate.
Simpler to trust. And once you have this trust, I think collaboration comes from that.
But also just like so many things today is just by default interoperable, right? Like, I mean, I deal with partnerships at Maker, and, we have like over 200 partnerships now. And that's because it's so easy to integrate like on one way or each other, because all these like different formats just like fit nicely together. And that's also something that, that really, really makes it easy just to like expand this ecosystem so fast, right? Because if you develop a dApp, you can very easily get some of the things that was very difficult to get before, which is, like infrastructure and like access and like, joining like an ecosystem. So I definitely think that, like just, and then also just being able to capture value on the token level, I think is something that also creates just like inherently like new business models, because you can monetize in a completely different way. And you can also, and that monetization, instead of having that go to, like the equity level or like give that back to the VCs, you can actually give it back to like the users of your platform. And that's something that, for example, when we get...
That's exactly, Garrick.
Yeah, I just want to say, I mean, just because we don't necessarily come up with radically new business models, we shouldn't, celebrate the improved, or slightly tweaked business model. So, for example, I'm going to give a commercial. Our company Blockchain introduced a swap feature where our users can swap crypto assets in a non-custodial way. And I hope the Maker guys don't mind my picking on Tether, but Tether had a problem recently out of New York, and you know what? That looks a lot like what happened with MF Global and John Corzine, the former senator, former head of Goldman Sachs, who took customer money at MF Global and speculated on European debt unbeknownst to his customers. Looks like something may have happened in the crypto space that's not so different from what happened in traditional finance. With non-custodial solutions, that's simply not possible. We cannot do that. We cannot take our customers' coins and go speculate or do something with them unbeknownst to them. So it's still, there's a transaction fee, not a different business model, but it's a new way of doing that, new way to make money, facilitating exchange in a trust minimized way. I think that's something we should celebrate as an improvement.
Edward?
Yeah, kind of echoing that thought. Even if we don't see truly new business models, if we want to be really cynical, we could say, yeah, we've seen it all before, but maybe we can see at least improvements upon what's been before. So that's one thing. The other thing was, I think now with blockchain, it's much easier to actually make money with an open source product. So when it's open source, it's essentially free. Okay, you could maybe dig into the details of the license and say it, but it's not, or whatever. But I think that's pretty hard. Red Hat has maybe made money, has been one of the few that I can think of off the top of my head that's been around for a while and has made money with an open source product. I can't think of too many others. Maybe there is, maybe the rest of the panel know of open source projects or products which have somehow made money for like the parent company. Now with blockchain, it seems that actually you can now monetize code which is open source. And is that a new business model? Maybe not. Maybe it's just a new way you're selling a product at the end of the day, or rather you're selling a service because your product is free. And I think my naive view is the world's going to move towards it, at least in the West, that will be more about open source products and more about providing services, high quality services, either for integration or just somehow providing some sort of service level agreement where you guarantee some sort of uptime or whatever. I think that's kind of the direction. The other one was actually Vinny's project, Vinay. To kind of shill him a bit, I think there is something really interesting there. If you can own some physical asset through some sort of smart contract, maybe you own like 1/10 of a bicycle or 100 millionth of a Stradivarius violin. It's not even looking.
And then you use that as collateral in the Maker system, right?
And then you can, buy and sell DAI or, Zcash, or whatever. I think that's going to be pretty revolutionary, that things can be more liquid in a good way. Things like liquid collateral was talked about on Twitter, and that does make me a little bit worried when something's collateral. Maybe it doesn't need to be super liquid, but still being able to kind of, I don't want to use the word democratize because it sounds a little bit kind of cheesy, but making it more accessible for just general people to then own like some fraction of a big building. Right now, as someone who kind of graduated with a PhD after the recent financial crisis, it's been really hard to say buy a house or an apartment. In the last two places I've lived in, one in Zug now in Switzerland, I have no chance. And where I lived in London, pretty much no chance.
I just want to say one thing. This fractionalization, this securitization, this goes back 40 years to Louis Ranieri inventing the mortgage-backed security at Salomon Brothers way back 40 years ago. So fractionalized home equity ownership, it's just an extension of that. Using a blockchain is an extension of that. So how different is it? In some ways, not so much, but boy, you can fractionalize home equity.
And we've seen it in London,
pretty cool.
even right now, even without blockchain. It's somehow the blockchain, I think, would enhance that. So it's, we've seen it before, but this will be enhanced.
I got to say here that, with all of this stuff, to be honest, I don't give a monkeys about tokenization, right? We've got perfectly effective ways of tokenizing things already. It's called equity, right? Anybody that wants to buy real estate in London in the form of shares inside of what are those things called? Real estate investment trusts.
REITs, yeah.
Like that's a really well-established category of businesses. There are millions of them out there. Dramatically cutting the transaction costs might have some interesting effects, but the fundamental driver for this is still securities fraud, right? Everybody that's running around tokenizing real estate expects to be selling these tokens to the general public, and there's no damn way they're going to be able to do that, at least in America, and it's unlikely in Europe, it's very unlikely in China. So I think that there's still a fundamental naivety about what the regulators really want out of these situations, because the last thing that they want to see is an enormous property bubble based on people putting tokenized equity onto, secondary markets for, the great new, pile of buildings in Shenzhen or wherever it is they're going to do. Like, if we were only going to be able to sell these things to accredited investors, the market is not going to dramatically transform because we already have those people, right? The place where I think the pay dirt is supply chain, right? I mean, the basic machinery of industrial capitalism is incredibly poorly organized. The software is horrendous. Anybody that's ever worked with ERP knows that. So I think the real efficiency gains are, 10% of the world's assets are permanently underutilized. It's $120 trillion of assets. I don't even know how you account that high. And those are markets where the problems are very clear and you can see where the damage is. Whereas simply making real estate speculation easier, I'm just not seeing where the profit is in that.